Welcome to Zero to Fightstick, the tutorial series that shows you how to build a fight stick from the ground up. Alright, today's lesson we're going to be talking about buttons, and it's everybody's favorite thing to press, right? Anyway, we need to know about the differences between buttons, how to connect, how to disconnect, how to remove, uninstall, etc., and little tips and gotchas along the way. Otherwise, buttons are very simple. They're not complicated at all. They should push on to turn on and letting go to turn them off. So here we go. The first thing you want to know is about button sizes. Now your case, well, it determines what button sizes it needs, but in most cases you're going to need some 24mm buttons at least for your options. If you have a hitbox, then at least a pure hitbox, then your action buttons are going to be these, and your movement buttons are going to be these, except for this jump button down here, which will be a 30mm, which are this size right here. So 24mm, 30mm, those are your standard sizes. There's also the American size, which is about 28, 29mm or so, and they do fit inside these 30mm holes pretty well. So once you got them locked down, they're not going anywhere. All right, so that's sizes out of the way. Let's talk about the differences between button types here, how they're retained anyway. And you'll see these two on the end. These are screw-in buttons. So it uses a locking nut like this that just comes right off to install or uninstall, whatever suits your fancy. Whereas this guy here uses tabs, so it's called a snap-in, and you'll see why momentarily. And the American style has its own getup, which we'll talk about. Anyway, let's first go into this snap-in button. And before we remove any button, typically we're going to want to remove the wires attached to it. And that depends how they're attached. Now, in most cases, you're going to have these little quick disconnects. So let's zoom in so you can see what that might look like. Anyway, so they just connect right on top here, and I could push it further down and lock it in place, but I'm lazy and don't want to pry it off. Anyway, so you'll have this with a wire. These little blocking tabs will be folded down on the wire to retain it, and we want to remove those wires in most cases. There are some exceptions. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, first of all, I want to tell you what not to do. And then first, don't pull by that wire, and try not to hold here and pull with your fingers. I guess it's okay, but typically I advise people take the back here and then wiggle side to side while you're pulling backward, and if it comes off, great. If you're still having trouble, then we can move on to other measures. So sometimes, I know I worked with the Neo Geo Arcade Stick Pro, and they had these kind of locking tabs. There'll be a little tab in between here, a little kind of thing to press, and with a very small precision screwdriver, I would just press in there, and then I would be able to pry it off much easier than just trying to brute force it. Now, if that doesn't work, you have some other options. If it's just really being obstinate, it's kind of cemented on there from being on so long, mini pliers are helpful. Just grab the back here and then pry it off. Try to be firm, but not too crazy. If it's really, really, really stubborn, you can use your flathead, and you'll see these curls at the bottom. Just kind of slide it under there. I'd probably use a smaller head here and just lever it up as little as possible until it will come out. And once you ply it out, just take your mini pliers and squeeze them back down, back into position. Not too hard. You do not want to crush this. If you had a wire there and you crush those curls, then you've kind of made that connector useless. All right, let's assume we've gotten those off. How do we remove this? Now, you can just squeeze these tabs very carefully and then push it out. However, with metallic sanwas and other sanwas, a lot of those snap-ins are very, very delicate. So I do recommend a tool like this, the Paradise Arcade button removal set. For this 30mm, we just see if we can work this in. Oh, we're getting a little too much interference. Okay, there we go. And then once you've got it on top, and make sure the plastic parts are, of course, making contact with the tabs, just push down and it has been removed. Easy. All right, let's go a little bit wider. So how do I put that button back in? Or another snap in back in? So all you do, and you're gonna hear why it's called a snap in, 2 clicks and you're done. So I'll just do the finger method and I want to show you from the top. This is the easiest button part of this series probably is installing buttons. There you go. But I do want to advise you on the gotchas. Another thing to notice, if you are creating new quick disconnect leads, maybe these were soldered on, you just use a soldering iron to melt that solder and remove it, and then you properly crimp it. These are 0.110 inch or 2.8 millimeter connectors, so if you want to buy a kit like this, you can do that and make your own connections. Alright, so screw in. We kind of showed it earlier, but all you do to remove that, once again, you remove the wires and then slide it out. To put it back in, you want to, when your little gotcha is, these rings will typically have some kind of bumps or indentation, like kind of teeth. So you want to put teeth side down against your case and just tighten it up. That's all you have to do. And of course, you may want to line this up a certain way if you're doing cable routing. So for example, like that. All right, so let's say I was connecting these back, and we'll go into wiring more in detail later in the series. Doesn't matter which one of these I connect to. For these types of buttons, no. You can connect ground to this, you can connect signal to this, you can connect ground to this, you can connect signal to this. Does not matter. I typically just assign one arbitrary side to ground and the other side to signal, so that it's just done that way. And for my neuroses, I guess. Anyway, let's talk about our last style of button. And if you're doing maybe an arcade 1-up refurb, you're putting new IL buttons in there because you don't like the stock, or it's just wearing out, you want to know how to change the switch or something like that, that's the American style button. Now, these are a little too tall to fit in most any Fightstick case. You have to get a specialized one. I believe AFS has some, and maybe Retro Arcade Craft has some. I'd have to look. Anyway, so make sure you have a lot of leeway, because look, this is like almost 3 times the size of these other buttons. It's crazy. Now, another thing, I just noted that this might fit in, say, an arcade 1-up, or this came from an X Arcade dual tank stick, so those big guys are chunky. If you have one of the old mass sticks, that would fit. These guys will fit into a much thinner profile. Screw-ins usually can handle a little bit thicker materials, so these screw-ins, I can get probably through some thinner MDF, not the thickest, of course. This, though, only would work with something like this. Some plastic, some thin metal, not as crazy as a arcade panel. They would not work there. But this is definitely meant to be in an arcade panel because it's so big. Anyway, to remove this, the first step is we remove the wires. And, of course, you always want to remember what wire went where, so when you replace it, you know how. You'll notice there's a flag tab here. Push this out just a little bit. We don't want to snap it or anything radical like that. You'll notice the pin comes out of the pin at the pin hole in the switch. Rotate this forward and then ply it out. So you have a pin here, pin here. All right. Then all you do to remove it is the same thing as the screw-in buttons. You'll just remove this locking tab or ring, and there you go. Now to put it back in, you just insert the main body, lock it down, then do the opposite on the switch. Put the low end first. Make sure this guy is facing up, because you don't want to try and fold it against the switch body itself. Slide the little flag back, and it should lock right into place. Now these, it does matter whether what wire you connect to. So typically you will never connect to this bottom one, because that means what to do. It'll send a signal when that switch is not being pressed. So we'll connect to this one, your signal cable, and this your ground. So there's that. And usually I recommend the D44X cherry switches over pretty much any of the others, the Zippies, the X-Arcades, etc. They're just nicer. Okay, that is all about buttons. So you've got your 24 millimeters, you've got your 30 millimeters, you've got your American style, you've got your screw-ins, you've got your snap-ins, and one last thing about these. These use a 6.3 millimeter. I'm not sure what the inch size is on this. I think it's a 0.178 connector. So if you're using a Brook PCB and you have the pin harness that comes with it, you have to re-terminate it with all of these. You cannot use this standard 110. All right, that said, have fun with your buttons. They are not hard to put in. We'll get to wiring them later and the fun with that. So have fun.